welcome to the House of ZK Radio, which is a focused podcast and media channel exploring everything ZK, zero knowledge. Thank you so much, Jon, for being here.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you. So I'm wondering if we could first start off with just some general context about Veridise as an auditing company. I'm very curious to hear about what was the main motivation for founding Veridise, and for you guys using your own in-house tools, and then finally for launching AuditHub as well.
So part of the reason why we founded Veridise is because we noticed that there were a lot of cases where, auditing was really big and people were performing security services, but really they were doing so in a way that was fairly inefficient, that didn't really scale with, basically the growth of the blockchain ecosystem, which is, by performing manual audits. And so the background that me and my co-founder came from is formal methods, where we created tools in order to automatically identify vulnerabilities in various types of software. And so it started out where, we worked on a formal verifier for smart contracts. And so from there, we decided that it made sense to create a security company that, yes, would operate similar to these other people in the space that would perform manual audits, but also would try to provide stronger guarantees by also using tools during the auditing process in order to provide higher quality audits. And then as those tools became more and more proficient at finding bugs, we decided that it was time to kind of take that those tools that we had developed and wrap them up into a platform that anyone could use in order to identify bugs as they're developing, rather than waiting for the very end of development to say, okay, now what bugs are there in my system?
Yeah, and really love that direction that Veridise is going through, because I feel like for a lot of auditing firms, in the way that these projects are currently developing, they have their development life cycle, and then they'll say release a product version, but then have that be audited all the way in the end, as you mentioned, waiting until the end for the project to be audited. And at that point, maybe there's quite a lot of bugs or different areas that they need to address before they fully launch. So in this way, with AuditHub, developers can catch those bugs alongside while they're developing, and instead of waiting for it in the end. Right. Got it.
Right. So the way the current auditing process works, where all of the software development is done ahead of time, can lead to issues, because once a bug is introduced and you continue to build on it, then you're kind of compounding the impact of the bug and making it more complicated to fix. And so by considering or integrating security into your development process, you can, one, make sure that your software is more resilient than it would be if you waited until the very end. And you can also make sure that you're shipping at a pace that makes sense and with the features that you want, because we see that in cases where people find out about significant bugs at the end, either they have to delay their launch and get re-audits or something like that, or they end up just taking out entire features that they were planning to launch with.
Got it. And are there any examples so far, or maybe ones that you hope to see in the future, where AuditHub was able to catch something that a conventional auditing process may not have caught during the process? Any kinds of particular examples?
Yeah, so we've been using AuditHub internally during our auditing process in order to, identify bugs while we're auditing. And so there are several cases where our tools have identified a variety of bugs in smart contracts and ZK circuits that, might have not have been caught by our auditors, or were caught before our auditors found them, let's say. And so, for example, recently there was an inflation bug that was caught by our fuzzer Orca. And then also another thing that we've been doing a lot of is integrating our ZK formal verifier Picus into the development workflow of ZK VMs like RISC-0. So RISC-0 has been kind enough to act as our guinea pig while we have been releasing this. And so AuditHub was very useful for us when we were auditing Risk Zero, because we were able to use PICUS, which is the formal verifier, in order to verify that their circuits are deterministic, which is, the most significant source of bugs in ZK circuits. But also it found quite a few, or found several non-deterministic circuits inside of their ZK VM. And reasoning about the constraints of a ZK circuit can be difficult, and having a formal verifier that's there to say that there is a bug and this is exactly what it is, or there are no bugs, was very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see where tools like PICUS can really help with that formal verification process. And just as a kind of just giving some generalized context for the audience as well, wanted to hear from you the need for ZK systems, like for example, all of the ZK VMs that currently exist in the market to be formally verified. Yeah.
So the reason why you really need a ZK VM to be formally verified is because with a ZK VM, you're basically providing the infrastructure that people are going to prove stuff on later on. And so if there's a bug inside of your ZK VM, then anyone who's building on top of that ZK VM, who has a product that is supposed to prove various information, that proof could then be manipulated by manipulating the underlying ZK VM. So rather than going through and figuring out how to attack every single project that's building on top of the ZK VM, you can actually attack all of them by just attacking the ZK VM itself. And so that's why it's critical that ZK VMs in particular are, have the highest degree of security.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially since a lot of ZK VM systems are becoming production ready, and even targeting some use cases like, for example, in the previous panel, there was some talk about ETH proofs with real-time proving of Ethereum mainnet blocks. And now that ZK VMs are becoming more mature, a lot of ZK applications are looking to be built on top of these ZK VMs. So it's especially critical that these underlying infrastructure systems be audited and make sure that they're ready for production.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I also wanted to ask you about some of the newest research that's coming up with Veridise as well. I know that the team presented a couple of papers at the CAV conference, so one with ZQL and one with multimod. So curious to hear more about what this new research entails, and then also how you see formal verification and these cryptography-related committees kind of converging together.
Yeah, so basically, these were papers that we published at Computer-Aided Verification, which is a conference that's all about using software in order to help you verify other software. And so the two papers that we published were multimod, which basically improves the ability of this thing called an SMT solver, which reasons very specifically about, like formulas that you provide it, to reason about ZK systems by allowing it to do reasoning about different primes. So when you're creating a ZK system, all of your operations are being performed with respect to a large prime. But typically when you're building like a ZK VM or something like that, all of your operations are being performed like modulo 2 to the 260 or 2 to the 32 or to the 64 or something like that. And so what multimod allowed us to do is to improve our ability to verify ZK circuits by taking advantage of the knowledge that you do have these multiple, kind of primes or modulos that you're solving against. Then what ZQL did is ZQL kind of took advantage of the observation that when you have a ZK circuit, you've got constraints and the witness generator. And when you perform formal verification, you always need to verify a particular piece of software against something. And so with ZK circuits, the constraints are really the thing that you want to have security guarantees about. But people are much worse at writing constraints than the witness generator. And so what ZQL does is it essentially verifies that your constraints are performing the exact same computation as your witness generator, so you don't have to write a specification, and therefore provides you strong guarantees about the behavior of your ZK circuit, but also has some nice effects like by proving consistency, which is what we called it, you can also prove that your circuit is deterministic.
Got it. And also in terms of other recent developments as well, in terms of Veridise's in-house tooling, I'm aware that Veridise also released LLZK. So wanted to hear more about the motivation for creating this modular IR framework, especially since a lot of the tooling, especially when it comes to ZK and being able to write these circuits, a lot of it is very fragmented and a bit, all over the place for the developer experience. So wanted to hear some more about what LLZK can provide.
Yeah. So LLZK is basically compiler infrastructure, which is not something that's very, fun to talk about for a lot of people. But at Veridise, we like compilers. And so basically the problem that we had at Veridise and what other companies have is the ZK space is very fragmented. And so you can build something that works for SIRCOM, but then people have moved to Halo 2. Then you build something that works for Halo 2, and then people have moved to Plonky 2, and then Plonky 3, and then possibly Noir. And so that makes it very hard to create infrastructure that works for ZK because you're always just re-implementing things. And so in order to deal with this, we created a compiler infrastructure, essentially, which lets people compile down from the ZK arithmetization that they're working with to this common intermediate representation so that we can, perform, formal reasoning about that intermediate representation, but also other people can build on top of it to do something similar. So you don't have to start rewriting your ZK infrastructure over and over again. And we can start sharing some common parts of ZK infrastructure that's kind of missing, like optimizations and stuff like that is often missing in a lot of ZK languages because people are frequently just moving to the next one. And so any languages that do have the ability to optimize constraints are not used as frequently, and that just means that people then have to hand optimize. And we found that these hand optimizations are more likely to lead to errors inside of the underlying constraints.
Got it. Yeah, and it's really useful, especially as you mentioned, that there are so many different proving system backends. And when projects have to migrate, like say if they want to migrate from using the Halo 2 system to some ZKVM-based system or some other kind of circuit level writing method, they have to fully migrate and oftentimes rewrite a lot of the constraints involved. So yeah, very great to hear that now there are more ways in which we can provide a more modular and a more flexible developer experience for these teams, as opposed to so many different fragmented proving systems as well. I know that for a lot of ZKVMs even, they have to migrate from Plonky 2 to Plonky 3, and that takes quite a lot of development time for them as well. So really good to hear about kind of how streamlined this new modular IR can enable this process to be.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the goal is like as new developments come out, people can start, rather than creating entirely new languages to take advantage of that proving system, hopefully instead they can, add a backend to LZK. They can add passes in order to go from some common IR to something more specific. And so that way we can reuse parts of the infrastructure or reuse things that were written before rather than always inventing something new.
Got it. And also wanted to hear just from your side, based on all of the audits that you've completed and all the research that you've done, are there any types of common bugs or vulnerabilities that developers should be aware of, especially for those developers who are building their own ZK VMs or their own ZK DSLs? Are there any sort of things that they should keep in mind of?
Yeah, when it comes to really anything ZK, the most common bug that we find are, non-deterministic circuits. And so you need to spend a lot of time making sure your circuits are deterministic. And that's why we created a, formal verifier in order to automatically verify determinism. Once you have tackled determinism, though, there are other things that you need to worry about. And so with ZK VMs, the nice thing is they're normally built off of, or they're referencing some well-defined infrastructure or well-defined ISA or something like that. And so like they're targeting RISC-V, they're targeting MIPS and other things like that, which have instruction set architectures which are very clearly defined. The semantics are known. And so at that point, the most common thing that you would see would be some of the semantics implemented inside of the ZK VM not quite matching the intended semantics of the infrastructure that they're trying to implement. And so in that cases, you could have deviations in the behavior of the application that you wouldn't expect.
Got it. And so there's some deviation. You mentioned deviations with what's being developed versus the behavior that one can expect, especially with these ZKVM systems.
Yes.
Got it. And curious to hear also, just a follow-up on that, are there any specific bugs that are unique to ZKVMs that you see commonly happen as opposed to, say, SIRCOM or some kind of ZKDSL, or just like vice versa as well? Any types of common bugs or other areas you found in those ZKDSLs or for languages like SIRCOM that maybe aren't present with ZKVMs?
Yeah, so in the ZKVM circuit itself, not really, because once you get down to it, the ZKVM is just another ZK circuit. And so similar to other ZK infrastructure, you're seeing things like non-deterministic circuits. You can see things like field overflows, or in some cases, you also have over-constrained circuits where there are some valid programs which wouldn't be interpreted. And so that can cause issues, but it's also things that we see in ZK. And so really, when it comes to something specific to the ZK VM, we're talking about logical vulnerabilities, which can happen in any particular application because it's specific to the application that you're implementing. And so in that case, like an example would be, not strict adherence to the underlying instruction set architecture. If you're talking about like people who are instead of building a ZK circuit, are building a ZK VM though, then, or building on top of a ZK VM, so they have like a guest program that's running in a ZK VM, then we see different common vulnerabilities. And yes, you do have things which are common, which differ from ZK. And in many cases, that's things like people who, and this is kind of similar to ZK, but people who are not actually proving what they think they are. And so in some cases, with a ZK VM application, you have an untrusted host and a trusted guest. And the trusted guest is going through the proving process. And so one of the common vulnerabilities that we see is someone using information which does not eventually flow to the underlying proof to be checked and is assumed to be safe.
Got it. I see. And just as a last question before we end today's interview, for any type of ZK teams in the audience, and we have quite a lot there, do you have any kinds of advice or any points of guidance that you'd like to share with them in terms of as the ZK systems that they're building are becoming more mature and becoming ready for production grade applications? Any types of advice that you'd like to give for those teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of them know this anyway, but security is critical. This is because oftentimes what we see is people, kind of offloading into ZK circuits some critical part of their infrastructure. And so for that reason, you really need to make sure that the infrastructure that you have running off-chain is free of bugs. Otherwise, it's very difficult to determine what actually was intended to happen on-chain, and sometimes it's difficult to detect on-chain. And so for that reason, especially when you're dealing with things like privacy, it is critical that you make sure your circuits are acting as they are intended. And so for that reason, at Veridise, we performed a study in order to see how frequently like ZK circuits have significant bugs, and we found that they were about twice as likely as DeFi projects to have bugs. And so that just shows how frequently this common or this critical infrastructure has things that are going wrong with it. And so using more security techniques that provide you with security guarantees is critical for ZK.
Got it. So the more security guarantees with the techniques, the better it is.
Yes.
Got it. And thank you so much, Jon, for all the insights, especially with this topic of our conference today with verifying intelligence. A large part of it is also for the auditing part, how important it is to be able to audit our systems, whether it be ZK systems or even AI-based systems, and make sure that they're ready for applications to be used by everyone. So thank you so much, Jon.
Thank you.